After the last video, the same comment kept appearing. Hundreds of you asked, "What if I don't have wood to burn?" So, I went looking. There is a steel drum in a garage in rural Wisconsin full of ordinary sand. No wires humming, no gas line, no monthly bill. I pressed my hand against the side of that drum at 11 at night in the middle of January. It was still above 200 degrees. The fire that charged it had been out since noon, 9 hours earlier, and the house behind it stayed 72 all night long. The man who built it spent $280 once. He has not written a check for heat since. Before this video is over, I am going to show you a test from 1822 in a castle in Poland that proved this physics so completely that the only reason you do not already have one is because someone decided you should not. The first time I saw this work was not in Finland. It was not in a lab. It was in a guy's YouTube comment. He wrote that he filled a 55-gallon drum with sand, stuck a heating element in it, wired it to a single solar panel, and his garage stayed warm for over 24 hours on one charge. I thought he was exaggerating. I thought it was one of those internet stories that sounds good until you try it. So, I started digging, and what I found made me angry. Not because the idea was new, but because the idea was ancient, and someone buried it. Let me take you back 5,000 years to Korea, and a system called the ondol. The word means warm stone. They built channels under the floor, ran heat from an external fire through those channels into thick stone slabs. The stone absorbed the heat slowly, then released it for 12 to 24 hours after the fire went out. You light the fire at dinner, you let it die by 800 at night, and your family sleeps warm until 6 in the morning. No fuel burning overnight, no risk, no waste. And here is the part that should bother you. 90% of homes in South Korea today still use radiant floor heating descended directly from the ondol. This is not ancient history sitting in a museum. This is a living technology in one of the most advanced economies on the planet. China had their own version, the Kang, an elevated stone platform connected to the cooking fire. As recently as 2004, 67 million Kangs served 175 million people across 14 provinces in northern China. Researchers documented heating load reductions between 50 and 80%. Half to 4/5 of the heating energy was gone because of stone, gravity, and patience. Rome built the hypocaust. You have probably heard of that one. Raised floors on stone pillars with hot air flowing underneath. Brilliant engineering, but it had a flaw. It needed constant fire, making it expensive and labor-intensive. The heat escaped as fast as it arrived. But here is where the story gets interesting, and this is the part nobody talks about. Medieval engineers in northern Germany, Poland, Finland, Denmark, and Sweden looked at the Roman hypocaust and asked a simple question. What if we added mass? What if instead of letting the heat pass through, we trapped it? They built chambers of granite beneath the floor. You lit the fire. The granite absorbed the heat until it glowed. You put out the fire. You sealed the chimney. Then you opened vents in the floor, and the heat stored in those stones radiated upward for days. One load of firewood provided days of warmth. Therefore, what the Romans started, medieval Europe perfected, and the proof still exists. In 1822, researchers traveled to Malbork Castle in Poland to test a thermal storage hypocaust that had been operating for 400 years. They fed it 7 to 10 of a cubic meter of spruce wood, burned it for 3.5 hours, put the fire out, and waited 20 minutes. A hall of 850 square meters, nearly the size of a modern American mansion with ceilings 3 stories high, rose from 6 degrees C to 22.5 degrees C. That is from 43 degree F to 72 degree F in 20 minutes, from a fire that was already out, using a system 4 centuries old. It was still working. Medieval Europe had at least 500 documented thermal storage hypocausts. The physics never failed. The physics never changed. It simply disappeared from Western construction. I spent a long time trying to understand why. But before I get to who killed it, I need to show you what it looks like today. Because a company in Finland just proved this works at a scale that should terrify every gas utility in America. In 2018, 2 engineers from the University of Tampere, Tomi Aronen and Markku Ilonen, asked a question that sounds almost naive. Can you build an energy-independent community using only solar power? The problem was not generating the electricity. Solar panels are cheap. The problem was storing it. Lithium batteries cost $300 per kilowatt-hour of storage. That is the number the entire energy industry is built around. Sand costs $4 to $10 per kilowatt-hour. Read that again. $4 to $10 versus $300. That is a 30-to-1 cost difference. Or if you measure it by volume, $16 per cubic meter of sand versus $39,600 per cubic meter of lithium battery, a ratio of 2,500 to 1. Same job, store energy, release it later. One costs a fortune, one costs almost nothing. So, Aronen and Ilonen built it. Their company is called Polar Night Energy. In July 2022, they turned on the world's first commercial sand battery in Kankaanpää, Finland. A steel silo, 4 meters wide and 7 meters tall, filled with 100 tons of ordinary construction sand heated to 500 to 600 degrees C using excess wind and solar electricity. It has a capacity of 8 megawatt-hours, enough to heat about 100 homes and a public swimming pool. Annual efficiency is 85%. The cost of the system was roughly $200,000. A lithium battery with the same capacity would have cost $1.6 million. That installation won the Productive Idea of Finland Award in 2023. It appeared on the billboards in Times Square. Time magazine named Polar Night Energy one of the best inventions of 2025. They are listed on NASDAQ Helsinki. And then they built a bigger one in Pori, Finland, 13 meters tall, 15 meters wide, containing 2,000 tons of soapstone, a byproduct from making fireplaces. It has 100 megawatt-hours of capacity, 10 times larger than the first, and 1 megawatt of thermal power. In summer, it covers nearly a month of the town's heating demand. In winter, a full week. It cuts 160 tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year. The cost of storage is $25 per kilowatt-hour versus $100 for lithium. There are 3 installations in Finland and 0 in the United States. Same physics, same sand, same sun, but different governments and different lobbyists. But why? Why does a country of 5.5 million people have this technology heating real homes right now, while a country of 330 million does not even have a building code category for it? The answer has a name: the American Gas Association. The residential heating industry in the United States generates $12 billion a year. The 8 largest HVAC manufacturers control 90% of that revenue. 60% of residential sales are emergency replacements. Your furnace dies in January, and you call whoever answers the phone. The business model depends on proprietary equipment, licensed installation, periodic service calls, and eventual replacement. A steel drum full of sand breaks every link in that chain. In March 2020, the American Gas Association held an internal meeting about how to slow down policies moving away from gas. In their own documents, in their own words, they described the shift to electric heating as, quote, an existential threat to natural gas direct use in buildings. They did not call it competition. They called it existential. Therefore, they went to work. Since 2020, more than 25 states have passed preemption laws that prohibit cities from restricting natural gas. When researchers ran the text of those laws through plagiarism detection software, the language was nearly identical across states. Copy and paste. The state representative from Utah, who sponsored his version, admitted it publicly. He said he did not come up with it himself. He became aware of it from his local gas supplier, Dominion Energy. His words, but it gets worse. More than 70 million Americans pay the American Gas Association's membership dues every single month through their gas bill. You are funding the lobbying machine that keeps alternatives away from you. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission opened an investigation into this practice in 2021. As of today, it remains unresolved. In January 2024, the AGA successfully appealed the Model Building Code issued by the International Code Council. They helped strip clean energy measures from national model construction codes. They reversed the first-ever gas ban in Berkeley, California, through federal courts. And this is not new behavior. As far back as the 1930s, gas industry executives paid Bob Hope, Jack Benny, and even Daffy Duck to popularize the phrase, "Now we're cooking with gas." In recent years, the AGA paid social media influencers to promote gas stoves using the exact same playbook. 90 years later, it is the same trick. Now, here is where it hits your wallet directly. The International Residential Code has no category for solid-state thermal storage. None. The code assumes heat comes from manufactured equipment, with a brand name and a model number. A silo full of sand does not fit any form. Therefore, it cannot be approved. Not because it failed a test, but because the test does not exist. Underwriters Laboratories, UL, has no listing for any residential sand battery, nor any listing for any solid-state thermal storage system at all. Without a listing, there is no category. Without a category, there is no approval path. A homeowner documented on Green Building Advisor that his $15,000 solar thermal storage system was appraised at $0. Zero, because there was no UL sticker. The appraiser literally could not see it. And the insurance catch is even darker. If your house catches fire and the inspector finds a sand storage system without UL certification and without code approval, your policy can be voided. Not because the system caused the fire, but because it did not have the right piece of paper. The code does not ban sand batteries. It simply has no box to check. And the people who write the codes have no incentive to add one. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking, this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need to tear out your walls. You do not need a permit. You do not need a contractor. What homesteaders across this country are doing right now in garages, in workshops, under porches, and in outbuildings is building small-scale sand batteries with materials you can buy at a hardware store and on Amazon. A user on the Drive on Wood forum posted verified temperature data. His sand battery hit over 600 degrees Fahrenheit. The next morning, the lowest temperature was 234 degrees, still climbing back up over 200 degrees for more than 24 hours. His materials, a heavy pot and fiberglass insulation, cost under $50. On the Permies forum, a builder named Zoot Laws connected a stovetop heating element directly to a 250W solar panel. No inverter, no battery, no controller, just direct current into a resistive element buried in sand. In early spring, it reached 500 degrees C in a couple of hours. In summer, it went over 750 T from a single panel that cost less than a decent pair of boots. A builder in New Zealand on the DIY Solar Forum installed a complete system under his wooden house. A 44-gallon drum cost $10. Sand was almost free. The heating element was $20, and the thermostat was $15. Mineral wool insulation rated to 1,000 degrees C cost $30 to $50. A fan and duct to push warm air into the house cost another $50. The total cost of the installed working system was under $300. The physics scales down perfectly. 1 cubic meter of sand, heated from room temperature to 200 degrees C, stores approximately 67 kilojoule of thermal energy. That is roughly 3 days of heating for a small, well-insulated house. A 55-gallon drum, charged by cheap solar panels, can hold temperatures above 200 degrees Fahrenheit for over 24 hours. So, here is what a retrofit looks like for someone who already owns a home. You put a steel drum in your garage, workshop, or any outbuilding with ventilation. You fill it with clean, dry sand. You wrap it in mineral wool insulation. You run a heating element into the center connected to 1 or 2 solar panels. Or, you plug it into the wall and run it on off-peak electricity at night, when rates drop to 4 or 5 cents per kilowatt. You attach a small fan and a duct. The fan pulls air across the hot sand and pushes it where you need it. The system has no moving parts except the fan. Nothing to break, nothing to service, nothing to replace. The sand does not wear out. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, in Golden, Colorado, tested this. A researcher named Jihuan Ma heated silica sand to 1200 degrees C and held it there for 500 hours. That is 500 hours at temperatures that would melt aluminum. They measured every property they could think of: thermal conductivity, specific heat, and structural integrity. The results, and this is a direct finding from a United States Department of Energy laboratory, showed no significant changes in any measured parameter. The sand did not age, did not degrade, did not crack, and did not change. After 500 hours at 1200 degrees, it was the same sand. Compare that to a lithium battery that loses capacity every year and needs replacement in 10 to 15 years. Compare it to a gas furnace with a 15-year lifespan and a $2,000 replacement cost plus installation. Compare it to a heat pump with a compressor that will eventually fail. Sand does not fail. It just sits there holding heat, waiting for you to use it. Now, I promised you something at the beginning of this video. The piece of this story that ties it all together. The thing that should have been obvious, but was hidden in plain sight. Remember the Malbork Castle test from 1822? Remember those medieval engineers who improved the Roman hypocaust by adding mass? They figured out that the key was not the fire. The fire was just the charging mechanism. The key was the stone, the mass, the ability to absorb enormous amounts of heat and release it slowly over time. That same physics, the exact same principle, is what Polar Night Energy built in Finland 200 years later. It is what the NREL tested in Colorado. It is what homesteaders are building in their garages with 55-gallon drums. It is what Korea has used for 5,000 years. The fire changed. First it was wood, then coal, then gas. Now it is electricity from the sun. But the storage never needed to change, because sand and stone were already perfect. The gas industry did not suppress a technology. They suppressed a principle. The principle that you do not need to buy fuel forever. The principle that you can charge a mass once and live off the heat for days. The principle that the cheapest, most abundant material on the surface of the Earth does the same job as a $300 per kilowatt lithium battery. The average American household spends $900 to $200 a year on gas heating. Over 30 years, that is $27,000 to $36,000 paid to an industry that knew since at least 2020, by their own internal admission, that alternatives like this existed and posed an existential threat to their business. Their response was not to compete. It was to make sure the building codes had no checkbox, no form, no category, and no path. If that makes you angry, and it should, hit the like button, because that is how this reaches someone who is still writing those checks. A $300 drum of sand with no moving parts, no maintenance, no degradation, and no monthly bill, connected to panels that pay for themselves in 2 winters, versus $36,000 over a lifetime to an industry that funded 25 state laws to make sure you never had another option. That is not a market failure. That is a decision someone made about your money. Now, before I show you exactly how to build this and how to do it without asking anyone's permission, I want to point you somewhere, because sand batteries are one of 7 systems I have documented that operate on the same principle. Store it once, use it forever, no bill, no service contract, no replacement. They are all in one place. It is called the Amish home system. The stove, the wall, the water, the fuel. Now everything is documented with exact materials, exact quantities, and exact steps for a home you already own. The link is in the description. But stay here, because the build I am about to show you requires no permit, no contractor, and no one's approval. And that last part is the point. The knowledge was never lost. The Koreans kept it for 5,000 years. The Chinese heated 175 million people with it. The Finns turned it into a company listed on the stock exchange. The only place it disappeared was here, in the one country where the gas industry had enough money to make it vanish from the codes, the classrooms, and the conversation. You now have it back. I want to hear from you. If you were going to build a sand battery this spring, where would you put it? Garage? Workshop? Under the porch? Drop that in the comments. Tell me your plan. Because this is how we spread what they tried to bury. Subscribe if you are tired of paying for something the earth gives away for free. The next video goes deeper. There is a material cheaper than sand that stores even more heat, and one man in Appalachia has been heating his entire homestead with it for 11 years. Nobody has told that story yet. We will. If this story changed how you look at the very ground beneath your feet, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Let's build a future that doesn't come with a monthly bill. The next treasure will be revealed soon.